Well, welcome. Tonight we have one of the people that makes things happen now in Milford and for Milford. Why don't we start with an introduction if there is somebody who doesn't know you?
Yes, Brian Murray, your state representative, Al. Glad to be here.
And our barrister.
Yes, part-time town council as well.
That's such a good job for the town because we get all your expertise, all your history, the Murray Library of all the
Yeah,
information, and we don't have to pay you full time.
yeah, no. I mean, it's worked out well in the sense that I've been able to facilitate contact, with a lot of the state agencies, DEP, housing, health, and then so many of the town issues overlap with state. So I think it's been a benefit, to be there at town hall on the days that I can.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but like last night, something came up at the FinCom that we weren't sure how to position and how to do it. And I didn't know, but Rick Villani called you at night and got an answer
Of
for us.
course, of course. I got my cell, and everybody has it, and call me whenever. There's no clock that I have, so I knew the meeting was going on. So absolutely, I'm glad to handle anything.
I have a silly question. We pay our legislators way under a real wage. Why?
I'm not complaining about the wage, So
No, no, Brian,
it
I
is it
understand,
is what
but
it is, and it's set in the Constitution that every term it gets the base wage gets adjusted for cost of living, and it's nothing that we even have to deal with anymore.
well, I remember when there was the argument of you voting yourself a raise.
Yeah, so that was when I first got elected, and that's not what occurred. It was a vote to increase the stipends for committee chairs, which at that point had not been increased in 35 years. So that number was the same as it was in the mid 1980s. And I didn't benefit from it because I didn't have a committee
You were brand
stipend.
new.
And that's what that was.
But I guess what bothers me is somebody starting out. Now, you had an ongoing business, you would put your kids through school, all the good stuff. But you get a new legislator. Can they live on the wage? Or are they almost forced to have a second job?
Well, I mean, a lot of folks do have second jobs, and we've got some young people in the legislature. They live with their parents, so it's definitely a mix of society. What's there?
Because I'd like to see people fighting for those jobs. But if I'm sitting there, what's a beginning rep make? 60 grand, 70 grand?
No, I think the base now is about 80,000.
Oh, that's better then.
Yeah, yeah. But that's okay. You must have more to talk about than what
Yeah.
the wages are.
Biggest thing, budget.
That's what's going on right now. So, the way the legislative cycle works, the term is every 2 years. So we started a new term this January. And as soon as that starts, the governor submits her budget for fiscal year 26, which starts on July 1st. And the House of Representatives then gets the budget. There are hearings, public hearings, of the Joint Committee on Ways and Means, which is both House and Senate members. Those run through March. Actually, we just had the last hearing, I want to say Tuesday. And those hearings are held all over the state. They had one in Worcester, they had one out at UMass Amherst. I think they went to Gloucester. So they've gone to various locations, to have these hearings all about the different aspects of the state budget. So that's coming to a close. And I think the House will be presenting a budget, I believe, next Wednesday, which is going to be the 17th. We will have until Friday to file budget amendments, and then we'll be in session after the school break, in third week in April, we'll be in session that last week in April, and that's when the marathon sessions start, when the House finalizes the budget.
Now, what is the logic of having hearings all over the state? Is it to get local participation, or?
Yeah, I think it's to, I mean, we obviously have the remote aspect on hearings for people to participate, but, you can't substitute for live. And the idea, I guess, to bring it across the state is to open it up to folks that, live in Palmer or live in Gardner or any of these places where, they would like to have a say, but really don't feel like going into Boston, and the remote aspect is not as effective as it might be. So that's the way it's been as long as I've been there, and I think far, far earlier than that.
But you hold open hearings throughout the year with the Milford people. I mean, if I want to talk to you about an issue.
Oh, yes, yeah, no, yes, I'm fully accessible and meet people wherever they'd like to meet. I have a meeting scheduled tomorrow morning, actually, with a gentleman who's got some questions. I met with a family, I think it was on Monday. Yeah, so as people can call me, email me, whatever it is, and then I usually set up a meeting with whatever's convenient for them and fits my schedule.
Yeah, so these hearings, it sounds good to get people participating, but I would think that if somebody wants to know in Boston what's going on in Milford, they could just come to you.
Oh, absolutely. But the Ways and Means hearings are more targeted. So, for example, one day they'll have the Veterans Administration there to talk about the veterans budget. They'll have a Department of Transportation there to talk about transportation spending. And then, of course, it's the entire department's budget. So now you get stakeholders who are interested in that, whether it's lobbyists, business people, and sometimes just plain folks, that want to testify.
So now we start going through the budget. Is any other legislation being worked on, or is it?
Well, yeah. So simultaneous with the budget, okay, there's been about 7,000 bills that have been filed for this session.
7,000?
Roughly between 6,000 and 7,000, which is typical for a legislative session.
I remember you telling us that before, and I said, how do you even have a chance to read your portion of them?
Well, they get targeted. So we have a committee structure. So bills dealing with transportation, for example, go to the Joint Committee on Transportation. Bills dealing with medical issues go to the Joint Committee on Public Health. So if you're not on those committees, you don't have as close a knowledge of those bills as you do if you're on the committee. And each of those individual committees then schedule public hearings on the particular bills. I was talking to the research analyst for the Transportation Committee this week and asked him, and he said they got about 330 bills this session, which is a little bit down. Last session there was about 400 bills in transportation.
So now, unless you're the chairman of a committee, by the way, congratulations, we'll talk about that.
No, thank you.
But if you're not the chairman, how many bills are you expected to read through?
Well, the public hearing, gets announced, and let's just say they're going to have a hearing on 20 bills or 25 bills or whatever it is. And, you get that material. The committee generates summaries of the bills that you can, refer to. But that's really the purpose of the public hearing, to learn about the bills.
Okay. So if I'm on transportation, am I expected to know all 300?
Well, I mean, as they come before you on the public hearings, I mean, not all at once, but they had the hearing today, and I think they only focused on the governor's Chapter 90 road money bill because it's dramatically different than what's been presented in the past. So I think they devoted an entire hearing to that, particular bill. And I didn't get a chance to talk to anybody today to see how that wound down. And there's a lot of other bills that are, very minor, very targeted, not as encompassing as the governor's Chapter 90 bill.
But will you be going through, if you're on that committee, all 300?
At some point, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. But again, not on the same day.
Not at the same.
Over a course of several hearings as they come to you. But yeah, you really have to kind of have a grasp, particularly stuff in your committee. So when I was on transportation last session, I had a pretty good handle on the 400 plus bills that were in that committee.
But you had to know those over, what, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months?
I don't recall exactly what the time period for the hearings. We shortened up the process a little bit, but I think ideally you want to get these hearings done probably by this fall. At the latest, because then after they have the initial hearing, they need to move on from there. If it's a money bill, it's going to go to Ways and Means.
But that's still 2 bills a day. And if you look at 400
yeah,
bills over 6
yeah, but
months.
it doesn't get done like that. It would get done on a committee agenda. So you'd schedule a public hearing, and like I said, you might have 25 bills on for that hearing, and that's how you kind of really get into them and learn about them, and then move on from there. And of course, after you have the hearing, then the committee votes on the bills, whether to give them a favorable report so that the bill will advance, an unfavorable report, which would stop it right there, or you could send it to study, which is kind of a nice way of saying we want to stop it right here.
I was going to say, isn't that a polite way of saying no?
Right. That's exactly what that is. Yeah, that's what that is.
But out of the 7,000, you're going to cull them out. How many of those actually make it to a full vote?
Full House vote, I would say probably under 1,000, under 500 maybe.
Well, that's still substantial.
Somewhere in that ballpark. And a lot of times what happens, and I think leadership wants to try to get away from it this session, but you'll have these omnibus bills, The housing bill, for example, that was a housing bond bill, which has the allowances for the accessory dwelling units in it. That bill, it's about 400 pages, I think. That was a conglomeration of, I wasn't on housing, but there were a bunch of bills that were put into that omnibus bill.
300 or 400 pages?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It took 300 or 400 pages to get a point across?
Well, the point is that there's a number of points in the bill. There's bonding issues, there's the ADU, and there's all kinds of stuff in that bill. And, stakeholders are still kind of going through it. We're dealing actually, with the specific portion on the accessory dwelling units in Milford because folks are interested in that. So I've had a lot of back and forth with the building commissioner, with the town planner. Jerry Moody, of course, who's still with us, has been very helpful. So that's just one aspect of that bill. But that was an independent freestanding bill that got wrapped into the housing bond bill.
Now, I said congratulations. You want to explain what you got?
Yes, yes. So I got appointed to a chairmanship for this session, which is a nice acknowledgement by leadership, and it's the chair of the House Committee on Human Resources and Employee Engagement. So it's a little bit of a different committee in the sense that I don't deal with legislation, but it's more operational and management. It allows me to work more closely with leadership on things that go on in the House. For example, we've spearheaded and in the process of having discrimination and harassment prevention and trainings for all of the employees. Got probably about 500 or so employees that we have to arrange trainings for. We took care of Student Government Day, which was just last Friday, which went off very well, thank goodness. We had about 400 kids from all over the Commonwealth come in and participate in a bill, an actual bill, that was filed by the Attorney General to limit cell phone use in schools. So the students were very, very interested in that. And, I stayed obviously through the whole debate, and they were there the entire day, and very impressed with what the kids did. So those are the kind of projects that I'm working on this term, as opposed to last term when I was vice chair of transportation. We dealt with a lot of legislation like we talked about.
Was it hard to walk away from transportation?
Yeah, it really was, because I enjoyed my 2 years there. There were subjects that, I could really relate to, with the municipal background. I understood them. I built up some nice contacts with Mass Highway, Mass Department of Transportation, which, is still there and are still helpful. And I'm still reaching out to District 3, not only on behalf of Milford, but on behalf of Mendon and Hopedale. So, you establish those contacts, they stay. And I enjoyed working with all of those people, I really did. But, the leadership kind of looks at everything and figures out what they need, where they need it. And this is what they asked me to do.
Is moving you, or not you, but moving legislators around more tactical? We got a problem, we need help here, or is it strategic that they want you to serve in a whole bunch of committees?
I think it's more tactical. So they kind of gave me some specific reasons why they wanted me in this particular position. So yes, they are very tactical in terms of, depending upon what they see as the issues out there, who they think might be in the best position.
Who has the skill set, the experience?
Exactly, yep. So yes, it's much more targeted. When you first get on there, gosh, I think they had me on like 4 or 5 committees. When I first got there, I was on global warming and healthcare finance and economic development and ways and means, which was fine, because it does give you a lot of experience early on. But now it's kind of zeroed in.
Well, when you first got there, you were put in a bullpen.
Oh yeah, we
with
were.
Very little resource at your fingertips to use.
Yes, when you first come in as a newly elected rep, you are in what they call a bullpen, which is just a glorified conference room. And depending upon, how many reps get elected, in my term, oh goodness, I think I had about 12 or 15 reps come in, so with their aides. So you had anywhere between 24 and 30 people stuffed in a conference room that probably wasn't a whole lot bigger than this room, And that's what you did for 3 months. But, we still talk about it. In fact, I talked to one of the reps now, was an aide at that time for another rep out of, he's from Salem. And, I ran into him and we were just kind of talking about it. The memories you'll have your whole life, the connections you'll have your whole life.
Well, I think that would build up some bonding.
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of like going through boot camp in the military.
Yeah, exactly. So you're there and you're right on top of everyone. So you got to learn to work together. But yeah, you're right. It was fine. It was a good experience, and I stayed. My first year. Well, they didn't move me out till mid-April, so we were there January, February, March, like 3.5 months.
Who makes the decision of location? Is it
Well, that would come from the Speaker's office. So the Speaker's office basically is the control center, the leadership, and they decide, what the team needs and where.
But is that decision based on the committee, or is it the person, or?
Well, I think it's both. I think they look at a particular committee. And, they might say, oh my goodness, this legislation's going to be really tricky this year. It's going to go through Committee X. We think Rep Y, has the kind of skills to handle that.
And he's going to have people in his office all the time, so you got to give him a little space.
Well, yeah, so once you, become then your offices move, yes, once you become a chairman, you have more space. You have your own office, you have more space to work.
That's interesting. And that's all done by leadership.
It is, yeah, that's the focus, it's like any, I guess, business, if you will.
I guess that's just
There's
like
a CEO.
commercial. I got an office off to the side because of the traffic that was coming in and out of my office.
Yep.
Having me in the middle of everything was just disruptive.
Yeah.
So there's like 4 closed offices in our complex, and I got one of them because there was constant traffic in and out.
Okay. Yeah.
So it sounds like the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when I had the high school cheerleaders, I had the Milford High School cheerleaders in today for a tour because they won a state championship. And we arranged for a state house tour, so they got to see all of the formal areas, the different halls and so forth. And then I brought them back into the area where we stay between sessions and showed them, which is not open to the public. And, we got some food for them and stuff. And before they left, I said, look, I want you to come down to my offices and see, what it's like to work here. So I brought him in, to the area where the staff works, and my office is right there. But it's nothing glamorous, and you're definitely on top of each other.
It's not like TV where you have 6 different offices and
It's
many
not.
aides.
No, it's not, and it's an old building, and I think they really enjoyed it. So it gave them a nice view of how things operate there.
Yeah, I think too many times it's what you see on TV, the West Wing. And then you see 30 people in the dozen offices, and
Yeah.
so you assume that all of government is the same.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember on the West, at the stuff that goes on is probably more like Veep, but it's but yeah, the spaces there are cramped. It's old, but everybody, everybody makes do. You do what you have to do.
Well, wherever you are, you've been very effective at bringing home
Oh.
to Milford what we needed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, now, the budget. I would think with what's happening with federal aid, what did you mention? It was 25% of our budget?
Yeah, for the most part. So our state budget in rough numbers is $62 billion. Of that amount of money, approximately $16 billion of it is federal money that comes in. And then, of course, from the $62 billion, that's how the state operates with the departments, mass health, but also money to cities and towns. So the budget process right now, and I just had a meeting with the chair of Ways and Means on Tuesday to go over some things, specifically my requests for my towns. Revenue revenue is pretty constant. We're at about a 3-4% revenue at least, which is very good. That's comfortable. You can have a budget. But the big cloud, the big uncertainty is what's going to happen at the federal level.
Well, if I was Ways and Means, I don't know how. Okay, I'm pretty comfortable with 3 to 4% increase this year, but there's 25% question.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's going to be the problem, or I should say the big question mark as to what's going to happen as we go through this process. So the budget that the governor came out with in January, that we come out with in April, that the Senate comes out with in May, could look wholly different come June if the federal government all of a sudden pulls back the full $16 billion.
Or even part of it.
Or even part, well, they've already pulled part of it. They've been pulling parts left and right, and that's affected various segments of the state. There was, I think it was about $100 million that had been targeted to schools for
To the grants.
projects. Yep, through some COVID era money. And those grants were signed, sealed, and projects were ongoing. And as you know, it takes a long time to do a project. When you're talking about, replacing your HVAC system for your school or your roof, these aren't things that you can do overnight. And I think about 15 or so towns or cities were in the process of utilizing those funds. And Friday, the last Friday in March at 5 o'clock, the federal government announced that those funds are no longer be accessible. So that's how business is being done right now. And it's extremely
So
chaotic.
wait a minute, I got a grant, sorry to interrupt, but I got a grant. I committed to putting in a high vac system, I committed to doing work based on getting funds from that grant. And then you take the grant away?
That's exactly what's happening.
I mean, I'm thinking about Town Park.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
We're halfway through renovating Town Park.
Perfect example.
It was $2 million that we committed. We've spent over $1 million of it, but we're expecting the grant to pay 1.3 of it. What happens? I mean, the town's committed.
Yep.
I mean, if I'm a contractor, I've done some of the work already. How does the town recover?
Good question. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the individual cities are doing. Thankfully, Milford's not affected by this one. I believe that the Attorney General's office in Massachusetts is suing the federal government for enforcement on these contracts. But, that's not immediate relief. I mean, the court system takes a very long time to get anything resolved. And even the court orders that you see come down in the country, the Trump administration simply ignores them. So it's a very, very difficult situation right now to get any kind of continuity or sense of what will be there to try to go forward and provide services to your residents.
Well, that even comes down to we're doing our budget, for, as you know, for the town right now.
Yes.
We're counting on certain grants, like the town park. There's $1 million that we're counting on.
Yep.
If all of a sudden they said, oh, by the way, Mr. Murray, just kidding. We're not going to pay you the $1 million. What do? Do we leave the park half done?
Litigation is an option. And then, depending upon what other funding sources exist, curtailing parts of the project and just kind of band-aiding it. I mean, I think all of the above. But those are the kind of scenarios that are out there right now. So, from the state budget perspective, we're just going forward, trying to put together a budget that would serve the residents with the information that we do have and the best information that we can go on at this particular point. At the same time, if things do change, we've got to be nimble enough that we can pivot and make adjustments. The problem is, and I've told the towns this, say there is a 20% cut to local aid or 25% cut to local aid, or I should say a 25% cut to the state budget. I don't know that you can anticipate that that's going to be a dollar for dollar percentage to your local aid, because the problem is with the state budget and federal money, a large amount of it goes to mass health through Medicaid. So the state would have to reallocate resources to satisfy that mass health. So the reduction in local aid could be more than 25%.
It's like 2003 where all of a sudden we got double hit.
So those are 9C cuts that happen mid-year. It's the same kind of concept, only much more dramatic and fickle.
Because I can see, like, we're going forward expecting a certain 40-some% reimbursement rate by the time we're done on the new high school project.
Yep.
But we haven't committed any money yet. So that would hurt, but it's not like the town park that you've ripped up half the project now, and where do you get the money? And I can't imagine it's an easy decision where, like you mentioned, do I fund giving people health care or new buildings?
Yeah, so those are the kind of prospects that are on the horizon, and that's what all of this chaotic activity at the federal government is presenting to all states.
But
So
they're
that
cutting funds that are committed now. This is not,
Oh, absolutely. On the smaller end, there was a $12 million local farm to school where schools could purchase produce from
oh, to
local
get the
farms.
local fresh produce.
$12 million. They just stopped it, even though it was a committed grant. They stopped. They pulled it mid-year, and that money's gone. So that program stops.
But the kids still need to eat.
Well, they're not going to be eating local produce with that money. So again, and schools, towns, they plan their budgets. You sign contracts, and of course, a lot of these contracts are contingent upon appropriation, but it is tremendously disruptive in trying to run a municipality and a school system.
I can't imagine going through 2003 again. We did it. Milford survived, but it was misery.
Yeah, no, that was tough times, but I think there's going to be a large degree of uncertainty, and we're only a few months into this presidency. This is going to be here for 4 years, so this is
Well, it's 60 days or 70 days.
yeah.
We haven't even hit that magic. What did you do for the first 100 days of your
Right,
presidency?
right. So this is the kind of stuff that's happening on the governmental side, where I know the focus has been primarily on a lot of the social issues and other things that's been done, which is a whole other discussion. But, from folks trying to run government operations and provide services to people, this is one of the major problems that's out there right now.
So if we remove the federal factor, just for this exercise, pretend that we're not going to get major cuts. Was there any surprises in the governor's first draft?
Not really. No, it was, I think there were some interest groups that were concerned about certain things. But, by and large, it was a good budget going forward. I'm sure there'll be some changes to it at the House level. But I don't want to say business as usual. But by and large, I think it was, going to be a budget that would, meet our needs.
So governor's budget comes out beginning of April,
No, January.
beginning of January.
Yeah.
House version is,
So we'll finish our budget in the last week in April.
and then in the last week of May, the Senate version?
So then, starting May, the Senate works on their budget. But they don't have to have hearings because we've already had the joint hearings of the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. So once it goes to the Senate, they just simply deliberate among themselves
With the information they
within the
got with
body.
the House.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
So by the end of, that's middle of May, by the end of May, you have the joint group that
The
beats,
Senate will come out with a budget. So then that's going to differ from the House budget. So ideally,
no, you think?
yeah, yeah. So ideally, you have the month of June for the Budget Conference Committee to meet and resolve it to come into one single budget, which then gets submitted to the governor.
But it's the end of June when we find out if our assumptions on a local level, because you've lived through it for too many years,
Yeah,
we're making assumptions all the way on Chapter 70, on Chapter
Right.
90, but we don't find out till the end of June, and we have to have an approved Milford budget by the beginning of July.
right. So you base the numbers on the best information that you have going forward, and by and large, that's worked well. Typically, and the state realizes that. So typically, your Chapter 70 funds don't really change a whole lot throughout the process. And I would anticipate that would be, the same as well under the scenario you mentioned.
Well, the glory years of Chapter 70 for us. I mean, you and Becca came through when the school committee 4 years ago came to us and said, we've had 400 extra kids show up. We need $6 million increase to take care of them.
Yeah.
My heart stopped.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, 6 million?
Yeah.
I remember looking at Kevin saying, I don't know what narcotics you're on, but you should share them because I don't know how we're going to pull this off. But then you came through with the Student Opportunity Act.
Student Opportunity Act, yes, and we're still in the process of funding that. And, as we talked about, Milford, really fits that profile to benefit from that funding formula. We have a large population of English language learners, a large special needs population, and a large low-income population. So those are the kind of the three factors that really leads to the funding.
Well, I remember you served as our piñata because we kept saying, Brian, Becca, the special needs is growing like crazy.
Yeah.
English language learners is growing like crazy. And we don't have an average income big enough to say, oh, just throw on some more tax.
Right, right.
And it was more frustration to beat you guys up saying, do something. I don't know that we expected you to come back with $6 million and more.
Yeah, well, and that was, similar to a lot of communities across the state. Now I think you're getting the push from some of these other communities that don't have these factors, that haven't gotten that kind of an increase, and I think they've gotten some financial stress. So there's a call to try to revisit the formula. I don't know how far that will go at this particular point, but there is a cause with some other communities with different demographics now that are looking to try to increase their funding.
Well, I think it was Waltham that just published an article where their school committee said level services isn't covered by the 9% increase they're expecting. 9% increase in budget, and it's not covering level services. Where can it go?
Yeah, I mean, costs, I mean, I'm sure, I think, on something like that, I'd be interested to see where their collective bargaining agreements are at. Because, about 70-80% of any expense is personnel.
It's labor, yeah.
So, that kind of a statement is, it's chilling, but it's out of context unless you can really get a look at, see what their collective bargaining increases have been.
And we've been fortunate, as you know, in Milford, because our arguments are over 1% with the school. That like last year we said the most we can go up is 6%, and they got down to 6.5%. So we're arguing over a couple hundred, $200,000-300,000, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But when you look at some towns around us,
Yep.
and they start using profanity like that 2.5 override word.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of towns are experiencing that, and I think it was some of the personnel increases that probably got them into that.
Well, we keep
point.
talking about the chutes and ladders, the steps and COLAs.
Yep.
And you start seeing budgets in different departments going up 6%.
Yeah.
And they're budgeting flat for their expenses.
Yep.
But it's 6%, 7% increase overall. But our revenues aren't going up that high.
No. So it's very important, as you go through the operational budget to, really be conservative. And, I certainly was in that position on the school committee and the select board, and you'd like to make sure everybody has the most money that they can, but that's not reality. And, you've got to try to be reasonable and conservative because resources aren't infinite. And you can only ask the taxpayers to pay so much. So
That's the thing that a lot of times people forget. I am so thrilled that we have a new generation of Milfordians coming in, making good money and able to really help. But you got to keep in mind the people who built Milford. The reason we're here
Yep.
are people living on Social Security,
Yeah,
two
absolutely.
grand a month. And when I see the apartments going for $1,500 a month,
Oh, I think they go more than that.
but even if let's say you make $2,500 a month on Social Security,
Yeah.
and you pay $1,500 or $2,000 a month for an apartment,
Yep.
that leaves you $100 a week to exist.
Yeah. No, it's a very difficult time period right now. There's no question about it.
One thing that we haven't heard a lot of lately is the impact on the town from the immigrants. Has it gotten quiet? I mean, all of a sudden, we were going up 200, 300 kids a year in the school system, and this year it's pretty flat.
Yeah, well, I think the number started out, higher than it had been, but from my understanding, there's been a significant change, and they've had a number of students that have left the system over the last few months. So I don't know if that's permanent, something to be anticipated kind of on a regular basis, or if it's a timing thing. But yes, that's fluctuated. So I think the school department needs to take a real, close look at that, to see where they are in terms of student numbers, because that, obviously reflects on personnel needed.
What happened? I mean, it seems like in the last 2, 3 months, the number of immigrants coming across the border dropped, they said, by 90%.
Well, I mean, you've obviously had a change in administration, and there are some changes in policies. There's changes in just thoughts on it, and I think that's affected people who otherwise might want to come to this country who've now elected not to, along with some different enforcement areas. But I don't know anything in terms of Milford, concrete numbers. Anecdotally, maybe you can kind of see things and maybe think things look a little bit different, but I don't have any concrete numbers. I did speak to Superintendent Craig Consigli a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, and he had indicated the numbers were down in terms of students that are there right now.
Yeah, and we got our letter about what population numbers that the SBA will support. And that was actually exciting because Milford was one of the 5% of towns. So you figure that's one of 15 towns where numbers have been going up, up, up.
Yeah.
And the SBA was saying you can't support projections of 200-300 kids a year. So we were scared they were going to cut it back, which affects the amount of funding we get. But
Right.
I saw the letter yesterday, and it was better than we even hoped.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, that's a process, and the town, has done it before, and it's a very significant process for the high school, but we need to participate in that, to get maximum funding that we can from the state on this project.
Let's look at a couple local questions. As our town barrister,
Yes.
what do you think the biggest challenge is? I mean, we've got the PFA remediation question. Is there any, and we got my favorite Monty Python, Not Dead Yet.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It seems like that movie where you chop off an arm and the guy comes back and says, not dead yet,
Yeah.
chop off another arm. Benjamin Moore remediation.
Yeah, that's been going on, going back to the days that I was on the select board. And for whatever reason, there was not a lot of activity that occurred for a certain number of years. But, since I came back as town council, we've kind of looked at that. We're working with DEP. It's still an issue. We're working with Benjamin Moore, trying to limit the town's exposure on that, and come up with kind of a reasonable cleanup proposal that will satisfy DEP and, allow this project to be closed.
But
But
Brian, what happened? I mean, I remember when we were kids down at Little League, well, Villado Field, Little League Field. As you came out, you saw those pools of gorgeous colors.
yeah,
You never knew that they were heavy metals that were going to cause problems.
yeah. I guess, that was at one point there was the old Bettinger's Corporation
Stylons.
there, Stylons. And I remember that too. You take your bike down to Pheno Field, and they always had pieces of tile in there. And you're right, the liquid would just come right out of the wall, just go right into the ground. And it was all these, wonderful colors, and you were, doing stuff in
So
it.
then
Well, it's
we,
all heavy metal, and it's all contaminated. And the problem is it gets into the soil, and I think it's down about a foot, 2 feet into the soil. And that heavy metal doesn't dissipate. That will be there forever. And if it gets into the water area, then it's going to cause pollutants in the Cedar
but
Pond.
then for years, we abused Jerry Moody because he kept coming back saying, I need another 500,000. I need another 500,000. But
Yeah.
it seemed like we're finally done. And now,
Well, we weren't. And, when I was on the board, we did have the Army Corps of Engineer come, and they did a substantial clean out of the area at no cost to the town. And that was the major focus that was done. There was some outside litigation which went forward, and that tried to put all the responsibility on Benjamin Moore as the successor to the facilities. And I don't know what happened with that, and the case got dismissed.
but is it safe to say we thought we were done? And now all of a sudden, not dead yet, we're back in the mix.
Yeah, I don't know what the thought was. I mean, when I came back, I dealt with DEP and found out that there were a number of notices that had come in. I don't know, 2018, 2019, around that time period, that for whatever reason, the town, it was not acted upon the way it probably should have been. And that's what I was confronted with. So we've had to reach out to DEP, Benjamin Moore, and we've got an engineering firm involved, and I think that we're going to come up with a final solution, hopefully by the fall, that DEP will be satisfied with, and can allow the project to at least be closed in the sense that no more active work on it. But yeah, it's been a big problem. Big problem.
Welcome back, Brian.
Yeah.
Here's a pile of poopy that nobody's dealt with. Go fix it.
Yeah. Well, that's. Well, it's not an easy thing, and there was some transition, some people left or whatever it was, but in any event, it is what it is, and we're working towards it, and we've got a direction, we've got a focus, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get it resolved.
We've heard rumors that ICE has been in town and arresting people willy-nilly, because I know at some of the churches, attendance was down in the Spanish community because they were worried that people were just being picked off. I did check with police chief.
Yep.
And I said, Robbie, this doesn't make any sense to me. He says, because it's not happening.
Yep.
What he explained to me was that ICE is coming in with specific warrants against bad people.
Yep.
And one of them was somebody that got chased out of Brazil for drug trafficking, arms trafficking, and people trafficking, and it's set up in Milford. Do we get involved at all in any of the legal of this, or do we just get out of the way and let ICE take these bad people away?
Well, the town's legal department, we have not had any involvement in that, but it's nothing new for the Milford Police Department to partner with ICE or DEA or even the FBI, and it's been going on for years. And it happened, back when I was on the board in the early 2000s. And I think the chief is absolutely correct. So, ICE will have a warrant or target an individual that they're looking for criminal activity. They usually reach out to the Milford Police, but not all the time. And Milford Police has always worked in cooperation with federal authorities on criminal investigations, which is what they're allowed to do, and which, quite frankly, they should do. And we've always done that in the town of Milford.
Now, as a lawyer, maybe you can understand it because I don't. When I hear mayors and government officials saying, I'm not going to work with ICE. I mean, is that like me saying I'm not going to pay my taxes?
Well, the distinction that gets lost in the shuffle is what we've talked about here are criminal investigations. And from my understanding, those are worked upon with ICE and local authorities
Oh, okay.
in cities and towns as well as I mean, I really only know about Milford because, but other towns do work with the federal authorities on criminal warrants. The issue is the civil detainer warrants. So those are not criminal. Those are civil. Those are like a speeding ticket.
Oh, okay.
And that's where you get that argument that the local police are not enforcing the civil detainers. Well, by law, they can't. It's a civil detainer that only the federal authorities can exercise jurisdiction over. State has no ability to act on a
But
federal civil
if I
detainer.
arrest somebody for speeding and I find out they're wanted by the feds for a murder.
Well, first of all, you can't get arrested for speeding.
Oh. Okay, I get stopped
Yeah.
for something.
Yeah, okay, you can, yeah.
Can the feds come in and say, Mr. Joe Smith there, we want you to hold him till we can come and arrest him?
Well, it depends. If the federal government has a criminal warrant, that's different than a civil detainer. If the feds only have a civil detainer, then no. The Supreme Judicial Court has acted on that very decision and indicated that there is no state authority to take any action on a federal civil detainer. And I think that's the issue that gets presented, that, oh, you're a sanctuary city because you won't hold on to these illegal immigrants. Well, if all you have is a civil detainer, the state or town or city has no legal authority to act on that.
But if you're wanted for murder or rape,
Well, that's a criminal
That's
warrant,
criminal.
and that's a different ballgame.
so you can get held for substantial crime.
Well, if there's a federal criminal warrant out for them,
Okay.
then the police can hold for that until the federal authorities can work with them and take custody.
Well, that
But
makes more sense.
That's different than just a civil detainer,
Well, that
which
makes-
is what most of what happens in the immigration area.
Because, when I think of if our local police have, for whatever reason, held a person who's wanted for murder, I can't imagine saying, no, we're going to let him go.
Yeah, no, that's not happening in Milford, and like I said, I can't talk to other cities and
Yeah.
towns because I don't have intimate knowledge, but, and I think the governor's come out and said that, state authorities have always cooperated with federal, and Mayor Wu said that in Boston too, on criminal investigations.
Well, it's like if I invite you into my home and you start breaking my furniture,
Yeah,
I should have the right to throw you out,
yeah, you should, yeah,
but
absolutely.
just having somebody, I don't harbor any ill will to people who came to this country to make their lives better and their family better,
Sure.
put their head down, work hard, pay their taxes. Yeah, they're not legal, but if they're carrying their weight and not breaking the law. But I have no sympathy for the drug dealers and
No, of
peop-
course not. Of course not. I don't think anybody does, And there shouldn't be anything held back for people doing that. And we've had a number of high-profile arrests right in Milford where, folks are dealing with drugs, weapons, and that kind of stuff. And, Milford's always cooperated with the federal
Yeah, we
authorities.
hear that a drug trafficker, arms trafficker, people trafficker left Brazil and set up shop in Milford. I can't imagine why I wouldn't want Robbie and his crew to remove that person from our town.
Well, yeah, but they can't do it alone. If it's a federal violation, then they have to work in cooperation
Right.
with ICE or DEA or the FBI, unless that individual has violated a Massachusetts criminal law.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point where people start saying we should fix the immigration problem in Milford. And you sit there and say, what, deport them to Rhode Island?
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, unfortunately, the federal government just has not acted responsibly on immigration law. There have been a number of opportunities to do that. Most recently, in 2023, there was the border bill, which would have set up a reasonable response for cities and towns, set up a process to get people into the country more orderly. But, for political reasons, it did not pass. So consequently, Milford, cities, and states are dealing with the effects of immigration, but really have no authority to deal with the cause of immigration because it's a federal issue. So unless and until the federal government deals with immigration in a responsible manner, cities and towns and states are going to be dealing with the effects.
Well, you're absolutely right, because if we look at the high school, we have to add 400 to 600 seats in the high school complex because of immigration.
Yep.
Nothing we can do. The kids, they come to Milford, we educate them.
Yep.
You're not going to say no, but that cost gets passed on to our taxpayers.
Well, it does, one way or the other. I mean, the state does give benefits, for increased students and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it puts a lot of stress on your school system.
Yeah, well, you
There's no
came through for us with $6 million a year
Right.
extra, Chapter 70.
But it does put a lot of stress on the school systems, and particularly it's the uncertainty. As I was talking to some of the teachers and the superintendent, student A could be there for a week, and then next week student A is gone. And student A could be gone for 2 or 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks later, student A is back again. So it's that kind of disruption that's probably even worse than getting,
Than knowing we have 100 extra
exactly,
kids.
yeah.
Well, thank you for everything you've been doing.
Thank you.
Let's hope you continue doing as well as you have been.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And we'll have you back in a few months, and we'll see. By summer, we'll know what the budget really looks like.
Oh, goodness. Yes, and I hope we have good news.
Well, one way or another, it'll be, the good news will be we'll know what to do.
Right.
Because as you said, the uncertainty is the scary part.
Yeah, it makes things difficult.
And to our 6 loyal viewers, thank you for joining. I'm going to get up on a soapbox and say, I hope all 6 voted. Because we had an election where we had less than 9% of our eligible voters turn out to vote. I've always committed I'll never ask you to vote for a specific candidate, but I'll beg you to vote. We really do need to influence where Milford goes by picking the right people. And only you know who's the right person for you. So as always, thanks for joining. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better day than today.